In this video, I'll be exploring the dynamic range of film and digital photography. To do this testing, I went out and bracketed 21 exposures, 10 under, 10 overexposed, and of course one properly exposed image. I want to see what happens when you drift away from the correct exposure. How far can you go and still recover the image? I used a full-frame Nikon D750 set to ISO 100. And I used a Nikon film body, an N90S, of course, with 100 speed film. The lens was a Nikon 135mm, set to f-stop 4.8. To underexpose the images, I used this ND400 filter. It darkens the images by 9 stops, and shot my 10 images using shutter speed to adjust the exposure. Just a heads up. Autofocus does not work with an ND filter attached to this lens. So some of the images are slightly out of focus, but this is not a focus test, so it doesn't matter. When I was planning the shoot, I wanted to shoot an extremely challenging lighting situation. So I shot into the sun, and Meg is holding a white lace fabric. We'll be looking at the white lace pattern against the sky and the dark pattern of her outfit. I used Kodak D76 to develop the film. I did not over or under develop the film. I then used a DSLR scanner to digitize the film images. I know a drum scanner is better, but this is the cheapest and quickest method I have. I then opened the digital negatives in Adobe Photoshop Camera Raw and did my best to balance the brightness and contrast of each image. Here's all the images as they came out of the camera. Digital ones from black all the way to white. And of course the film ones, upper ones, are the underexposed. Now the overexposed ones are black, and you'll notice there's some light leak between frames, which I find interesting. Now let's compare the underexposed images. At -1 stop, nothing really to see. -2 stops, again, nothing to see. Okay. At 3 stops, it looks like film is already losing its usability. At 4 stop, film only gets worse. Digital is still fine. At 5 stops, I think film has become unusable, but digital is still usable. Shot number 6. At 6 stops, it looks like the focus drifted out of the digital image, so we need to rely on the contrast to view the test results. At 7 stops, the grain is becoming a more serious issue. Let's zoom in and have a look. It appears to be patterned, so it's more of a digital noise rather than a random film type grain. At 8 stops, the digital image still has enough contrast to be recognizable. At 9 stops, the grain in the digital image is becoming unacceptable, and the film has just a hint of what was an image. At 10 stops, you can still see the digital image, which is actually very impressive, although the quality is so bad I have no clue on any usability. Now let's compare the overexposed images. Alright. We'll skip a few and start with 2 stops. At 2 stops overexposed, everything looks fine. At 3 stops, film is fine, but it looks like digital is already starting to lose some of the upper highlights. Alright. At 4 stops, film still looks fine, but the highlight loss in digital is becoming very clear. At 5 stops, film still shows impressive separation between darks, mids, and highlights. The digital image shows highlight loss starting to reach into the midtones. At 6 stops, film continues to impress me. Digital clipping is cutting more into the midtones. 60, 30, 15, this is 15. Okay. At 7 stops, film is starting to look a bit grainy, but still shows no loss of shadow and highlight separation. Digital retains only the dark areas now. At 8 stops, film continues to impress, and the increased grain seems to add an ethereal feeling to the image. Digital only shows shadow detail at this point. Okay. At 9 stops, we see film is losing detail contrast, but still retains separation from lights to darks. Digital is now losing even the shadow detail. At 10 stops, we see the digital image is completely gone. Film seems to retain its ability to distinguish between the dark and light areas of the photo, and the muted contrast adds a minimalist feel. The increased grain adds an abstract pictorial look, reminiscent of the early days when photography was breaking ground as an art form. So in summary, this has been a very fun and interesting experiment. I think that digital has a usable dynamic range of -6 or 7 to +2. I thought that at -8 stops, the grain made the digital image unusable. Of course, this is subjective, and your opinion may vary, and different digital cameras may yield different results. I think the usable dynamic range of film is -2 stops to +10 stops and maybe beyond. I thought that at +8 stops and beyond, film has a distinctive aesthetic look that I consider desirable. Of course, this is subjective and your opinion may vary. It's important to understand that I'm not an expert. I'm doing this experiment and I'm sharing what I'm learning as I'm learning it. If you do similar testings, your results may vary, especially using different films, as all films tend to be unique. Big shout out to Meg, my model, whose willingness to sit in front of my camera made this video possible. Thanks a lot, Meg. As usual, some of the images will be on my Flickr page for you to view. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please click the like and subscribe button to help support this channel. Thanks a lot.